Welcome to Walk the Talk with me, Dave Thomas. Thank you for downloading this edition of the programme. I do hope you enjoy it. A change is as good as a rest, or so they say. It's a well-known saying that has been around for years. So much for change. But as I have learned, there are many sayings that have survived the test of time, and that is a testament to the truth that they hold. I have also learned that there are subtle clues in our everyday lives that point perhaps to a greater truth. I will be exploring these in much greater depth next season when I look at religions and philosophies and whether they all ultimately converge onto the same track. But back to the present. I try to base what I believe in and the thoughts that evolve as a result of them on the things that I can prove. Well, here are a few things that I think that can be proved. Life is in a constant state of change. Look no further than your own body. Your cells die and are replaced every second of every day. Your body changes as you get older. Look to the world we live in, the seasons of the weather, how trees and animals go dormant every winter, to re-emerge in the spring reborn. Looking further into the skies, and we can document the birth and death of stars, and how this universe, this life, wastes nothing and reuses dead stars to make new ones. And as you sit here listening to me now, your body is made up of elements that have been formed within stars and nowhere else. You are truly a child of the universe. So what's my point? It is a tenet that change is a crucial part of life. Fact. So why do we, as human beings, find it so difficult to accept change? Well, that's an answer I'm less sure of. But here are some of my own thoughts. Ego. We like to think of ourselves as an end product. Why change perfection? And if we do feel the need to change, usually our physical appearance, then it's to make a greater body, even better. Of course, the opposite could be true. We may feel insecure and afraid to change, thinking that we're not good enough or believing it is not possible. Perhaps arrogance and selfishness, wanting to keep the status quo for our own benefit, knowing full well that it will impact on others and at some point ourselves. Perhaps protecting our own interest for as long as you can before you have to let it go. Or maybe your resistance to change is because of a bad experience where the final result was worse than the position you set off from. Whatever our resistance to change, I suspect there is a small voice within each and every one of us that is gently nagging us to do exactly that. Because if we not only share a universe that is in constant change, but are actually a very part of it, then we are swimming against the tide if we don't change. We were born to change. Now, this neatly takes me to my very own recent experience of change. At the beginning of October, I gave up 20 years of being a uniformed police officer and went into plainclothes investigation. To compound matters, I'd spent the last 10 years on a specialised unit dealing solely with road-related incidents, including fatal and serious injury collisions. My reasons for changing were varied, but some of the more obvious ones were that I needed a change. I was on a department where I pretty much knew everything there was to know. I was well known and well respected. I was going to incidents, usually on blue lights and sirens, where it no longer fazed me, no longer having that feeling in the pit of my stomach, which heightened my senses and gave me that slightly nervous feeling. I was becoming tired and, to be honest, not having the same passion I had when I joined the unit all those years ago. It was not fair on my colleagues, and I was certainly not being fair on myself. I loved what I was doing, but I knew I had to let it go. So I applied and was successful in joining my CID department. I left a unit where I knew everything to joining a unit where I knew nothing. In hindsight, I knew more than I thought I did, but at the time I almost became traumatised. Police work at the moment is relentless. The old stigmas about certain departments having an easy life are long gone. Having left one department to go on to another, where that accusation was often levelled, I can speak with some authority. The way you deal with a challenge is very much affected by how you feel about it and your own disposition. I joined my new unit with no desk, no drawers. Luckily, I had 20 years behind me to know that this wasn't personal. It's just the job. But imagine if my perception of it was personal. The same situation, but now how I feel about it would be completely different and probably would affect my well-being and positivity. So in order to deal with change, I do believe you need a certain level of resilience and a certain level of emotional intelligence. The catch-22 is that to take on board that advice, you need a level of emotional intelligence that can only be got by experience of change, and not by me telling you it's so. Despite all that, I found myself falling into old ways, going back to having no confidence, scared to make decisions, doubting even the simplest of things. The officer I used to be 20 years ago when I first joined. And that's where support is important, and even more so if you are a new fish out of water. I was beginning to own a workload I knew nothing about. No one was telling me how to deal with it, and the pressure was, these weren't shoplifting offences. These were rapes, robberies and serious assaults. There was a pivotal moment, however, in my confidence scale. Someone asked my advice on a traffic matter. There and then I realised I had something to offer, and when you can do that, then you are part of a team. My workload hasn't changed. The amount of blue cardboard folders in my tray are the same. I am adapting to the new regime, the way we work, not the same as how I used to work. I have learnt to survive because I have had to change. But how did I feel about that change? Frightened, alone, with no familiar friends to guide me, team members frazzled with their own workload, unable to help unless asked. But how I feel about my experience, I now realise, is wholly dependent on me. That pile of files in my tray will not go away. How I feel about them will not make them go away. But how I feel about them will affect how I deal with them. So whether you're a supervisor or a foot soldier, the outcome is the same. And how you feel about change is uncomfortable. So I've learnt to allow myself to feel uncomfortable, to feel like a fish out of water, feel like you were that new employee when you first joined. Whether you're changing a department, holding the same rank, or hoping to progress up a rank, don't try to stamp down on those feelings you have since forgotten about. There are lessons hidden within those experiences that through familiarity we have forgotten. And it's natural to feel this way. World-famous performers still suffer from crippling stage fright. So, I think the secret is to keep going. Sometimes with baby steps, but keep going. That's when you learn to rely on the strength you didn't know you had.